On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks are back to 500 on the season with a nice taking care of business kind of victory at home over the Golden State Warriors. We'll get into all of what transpired, a slow start, a big run late in the first half, and then a hold on for dear life kind of finish. All that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1433 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Friday evening here in mid-March. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And today's podcast will be getting into what became a nice win for the Hawks at home, 127-119 over the Golden State Warriors. I want to remind you at the top of the podcast, as I always do to make it your first listen here at Locked On Hawks each and every day. Check us out across podcast platforms anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, etc. And we definitely encourage you to subscribe there. And also thank you for listening to the podcast as we always do. So we'll get into kind of how the nuts and bolts played out in this one, but big picture, the Hawks get a nice victory here. Again, back to 500 for the season at 35-35. No one is thrilled by that, and I totally understand that, but still a taking care of business kind of spot. They were down by 12 out of the gate in this game, had a big run in the first half, and then basically held on for dear life in the second. They led for every second of the second half, but it was not necessarily comfortable down the stretch, to say the least. And I will say also, there was a lot of news on Thursday. I did an emergency podcast breaking down the extension of Bogdan Bogdanovic, which we'll have a little bit more on later on in this podcast, just some more details on that. But I would encourage you to listen to that podcast, some mailbag stuff from 2 days ago. It has been an unanticipatedly busy last couple of days, even with the Hawks not playing in between Monday and Friday. But again, this win is really nice. If you would have told me coming into the day that the Hawks would have won this game at a three-point line, I would have been a little bit surprised by that for sure. But it was a big part of the story. The Hawks were 16 of 41 from three in this game. That is way above their averages in three-pointers made, three-pointers attempted, and percentage. 39% is really, really very solid, but really even more so about the attempts for the Hawks. Meanwhile, the Warriors are a top three team in the league in both three-pointers made per game and percentage, and they were 11 of 40. So the Hawks took more three-point attempts, only by one, but still, even matching Golden State in terms of attempts is huge, and then also making five more. The Hawks being plus 15 at three-point line is definitely not familiar territory. In fact, if you had told me that the Hawks had done exactly this for three-point range, I would have guessed that the Hawks won very comfortably, actually, because of everything else that would have happened in the game. But it turns out the Hawks actually needed to have all that go their way in order to get this one. That didn't necessarily, provide a breezy outcome, but it was really good to see the Hawks take advantage of Golden State's defensive issues without both Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins. Probably they're two of their top three defenders. Draymond's the best defender for sure, and just getting up threes throughout. In fact, Quinn Snyder, after the game, I was smiling when he said this, but he definitely complimented his team on taking 41 threes, and I think I've been banging the drum for a long time for the Hawks to be shooting more three-pointers. Snyder did say it was a good thing, but also said in the same breath that the Hawks actually passed up a few and probably should have taken even more threes, and I love to hear that. I think that was good process throughout this game for Atlanta on offense. Speaking of the offense, ended up with about a 120 offensive rating in the game, which you'll always have to take against Golden State, really anybody. That's a very good number, obviously, but it was actually really, really good through three quarters and then really, really bad actually in the fourth quarter. The Hawks scored less than a point per possession in the fourth quarter, and it did not quite bite them because Golden State had some of their own issues offensively. It was more of a slog down the stretch. The Hawks didn't shoot it incredibly well. Again, 39% from three is very good, but not like absolutely out of this world. And from two-point range, they were actually just kind of pretty average in this one. And also 17-25 on the line, which is way below where the Hawks normally are. They actually missed 4 free throws in the fourth quarter of this game. That almost bit them. It actually didn't bite them, but still. A big factor, though, beyond three-point shooting was the turnover battle in this game. The Hawks had 6 fewer giveaways than the Warriors. That led to a significant swing in terms of points off turnovers because Golden State's turnovers turned into fast break points for the Hawks, and Atlanta took care of the ball in the way that they usually do in a good way. Also, the Hawks had 7 guys in double figures in this game. Very balanced offense. Trae Young was certainly the number one guy who was really good in this game. John Collins had a nice breakout in the first half, and Okongwu was really good as well, but it was really nice balance from the Hawks altogether on offense. We'll get into the details later on, but the fourth quarter was very rough. Some very bad shooting, but defensively, as we're getting into right now, it got better as the game went along, not worse. It was kind of the polar opposite of the offense, quite honestly, because it was really rough defensively for like the first 2.5 quarters, 3 quarters, and it did improve down the stretch. But overall, a 111 defensive rating, you have to say that's a good result against the Warriors. Even without Draymond and Wiggins, that's still a good offensive team for sure. Now, granted, Golden State's been bad on the road this year, but they still had Steph playing. The Hawks did have some really rough metrics, though, in the supporting stuff. In fact, 68 points in the paint for the Warriors and 62% from two-point range in this one, plus 16 offensive rebounds. Those are all really bad numbers. And I've gotten into this a lot in the last even few days, dating back to the mailbag I did a couple days ago. But once again, the point of attack defense was very bad in this game. I won't name names just yet, but there was some really, really shaky containment of the ball in this game, and that kind of gave some free runways to the Warriors. The Hawks, I thought, benefited from the Warriors missing some shots they normally make, especially late in this contest, but still some nice results overall. And they did force 17 turnovers, including the big one by Trae Young to kind of seal the game at the very, very end, but they were at least opportunistic. One of the ways to beat the Warriors in particular is to have the Warriors give you the ball. That's probably their biggest weakness on offense overall, is their lack of ball security, and that definitely reared its ugly head in this one for Golden State, and very much benefited the Hawks in terms of taking care of the ball. And as I always kind of like to point out, the Hawks ended up winning the possession battle in this game. Now, not by a drastic amount, but they took 2 more shots from the field and 5 more free throw attempts than the Warriors. That gives you a little bit of cushion. And with 27 assists, very solid across the board on offense there. They had 7 steals and 8 blocks. Very good numbers there as well. So, the shooting stuff was really not great in terms of at the rim for the Hawks defense, but they did enough, let's say, down the stretch. And overall, this is a very, very solid win. The Hawks did not play perfect or anything remotely close to perfect in this game, but they honestly needed to get this one. Now, obviously, I'm the one to point out always that I think people get a little bit too carried away with every single result in the NBA. It's 82-game season. You can't get too high or too low. I guess fans can, but obviously just in terms of trying to be an evaluator of this stuff. But the Warriors came in with a 7-27 road record in this game. And they were playing without 2 of their top 4 players in Draymond and Wiggins. And Steph Curry was questionable coming into the game. He ended up playing, but probably wasn't 100%. So Atlanta was favored in this game, according to our friends at FanDuel, and rightfully so. The Hawks were the healthier team, playing at home with plenty of rest, 3 days off in between games. That's a good barometer. Not always, but I think the betting market is a good way to kind of test out, even if you're not a gambler, just to kind of evaluate like what the projection actually is for people that are very smart in setting these lines. And the Hawks were favored for a reason. So losing this game at home would have been bad. The Warriors, going into the fourth quarter, by the way, had not won a single game this year on the road when they trailed after 3 quarters. And the Hawks almost lost this game to the Warriors in that same predicament. So it wasn't always great. I still believe that the Warriors are not quite as bad as their record says on the road. But regardless, context-wise, this is a game the Hawks needed to get back to 500 for the season, and it's certainly a very, very solid result at home on a Friday evening. All right, we'll get into how this game kind of unfolded in a moment, as well as our usual evaluations of each and every player that contributed for the Hawks on this night. But first, a word from our sponsors on the podcast today. Today's show is sponsored by Nissan. Nissan's Most Illustrious Player of the Week is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. And this week's choice is going to be Trae Young. The Nissan Ariya is brilliantly fierce, fiercely elegant, and stunningly powerful, bringing an impressive combination of traits to the table. It is the perfect crossover. Trae Young was awesome this week, averaging 33.7 points and 10.7 assists per game in the 3 games over the course of the last 7 days. Also very solid efficiency-wise for Trae. Made a huge defensive play down the stretch to seal the game for the Hawks against the Warriors on Friday, and he is certainly the standout of the roster at this moment in time. The Nissan Ariya packs power that will pin you to your seat, and it also has premium intelligence all-in-one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. All right, and there were 2 really rough periods for the Hawks in this game, and one of them was right at the start of the contest. It was 16-4 Warriors in the blink of an eye out of the gate. Trae got called for a take foul at one point, give up a free point. The Warriors made 3 threes in a hurry. The Hawks were 2-9 from the floor to start the game, and it felt like there was going to be one of those nights at some point early in the first quarter. Fortunately, John Collins had an explosive stretch, kind of out of nowhere. I certainly would admit to being a little bit higher on Collins than the Hawks fans seem to be at this point, and not even I saw a stretch coming where John Collins had 17 points in 7 minutes to start this game in the first quarter. He was 7 of 8 from the floor with 3 threes, had a block and a steal as well on defense. He missed his first shot very badly and then made 7 shots in a row. I thought it was encouraging that he kept shooting at that point in time. By the way, he set a career high for scoring in a first quarter with 17 points, and I also tied a career high for points in any quarter with 17. So that was a huge swing. I think both early and late, Collins got some praise for Quinn Snyder at the end of this game as well, kind of unprompted, about his rebounding at the very, very end of the game. A couple of high point, important rebounds in crunch time, but it was kind of bookended by that strong start when the Hawks had not a lot going well for them early on. Collins was kind of the only guy that found it out of the gate in this one. Rotationally, it was as expected because Jalen Johnson missed this game. Now, Johnson was on the injury report as probable with some hamstring tightness in this one. And usually probable means they're going to likely play. But Snyder said, before the game, that Jalen kind of just felt something in the hamstring. They want to be very cautious. Obviously, there's no reason to push him in this spot. But with him out, AJ Griffin ended up playing and returning the rotation. That was kind of what you expect. And the Hawks had a pretty balanced rotation. They actually played all 9 guys more than 21 minutes. That's usually there's a guy or two in the teens somewhere. But so obviously the bench was pretty solid in this spot overall. But good to see AJ playing well. They left Collins in for a little bit longer than usual because he was hot in the first half. And they also played the lineup that I think is pretty funny in some ways. It also could be scary on offense and scary on defense. That Trae, Bogey, Griffin, and Saddiq Bey together lineup. Now, offensively, that is terrifying. Trae Young with 3 really good shooters on the perimeter is unstoppable. I'll just say that. It's unstoppable. It really is. Plus a roll man, either Okongwu or Capella. That's unstoppable stuff. But defensively, those 4 guys together is a bit of a roller coaster. So it's high variance for sure. But, because it is so good on offense, it's like kind of maybe you can live with it. But we circle that because defensively it's pretty untenable on some level. But the Hawks did dominate the 6-minute stretch from the middle of the first quarter to the end of the first quarter. An 18-4 run to close things up, to go up by 8. It's hard to be down by 12 early in the game and be up and then be up 8 at the end of the first quarter, but it happened. And here the Hawks were flying high on offense. They made 5 threes in the first quarter. That's more threes they made in the first quarter tonight than they did the entire Minnesota game on Monday. Also, again, attempting them at a high level, and then 4-7 turnovers by the Warriors at the outset. It was pretty scattered in the second quarter, very up and down, kind of offense focused. Ended up playing pretty even in the first half of the second quarter. AJ Griffin had a nice steal and dunk in transition. Also, the bench was really productive on offense. Again, defensively, kind of struggling a little bit, but it was a high-flying quarter. Both offenses were not quite as good as you might think because the pace was just really fast at that point in time. And they ended up taking more threes than the Warriors in the first half and scoring at a very high level. The Hawks had 17 assists and 5 turnovers before halftime. That's an excellent split. And then Trae had 10 and 9, Collins had 20, and but defensively, as I said before, it was kind of the same problems throughout the game, letting those free runways to the rim happen on the perimeter, although it got better in the second half. The biggest push in the second half was actually early in the third quarter, a 9-0 run by Atlanta to go by 14. Capella had his best stretch of the game at that point in time. He walled up on Steph Curry at the rim, blocked Kevon Looney at the rim. Moments later, had a dunk, had a tip in. It was very active after he had kind of struggled, I thought, in the first half. Clint was very good in the third quarter. Trae also very, very good at that point in time as well. But the Warriors were not ready to fade just yet. They started chipping away from there, got down to 5 by the middle of the quarter. Jordan Poole had a explosive Jordan Poole-like stretch with 8 points in about a minute. And by the way, for the whole game, he had 12. So he had 8 points in a minute. And that was basically all he did the entire game. But the Hawks were up by 8 still. A couple of helpful buckets from Griffin and Bogey at the very end of the third quarter. And then AJ had a nice, the pass was to AJ from Okongwu. A really good look and a kick out there by Okongwu. But through 3 quarters, the Hawks had a 130 defensive rating, 104 points on 80 possessions. That is absolutely lights out. Unfortunately, as I said before, the fourth quarter was much more of a slog. Now, you can already tell by the points, but if you didn't watch this game, it was maybe even worse than this. It was 23-23 in the fourth quarter after both teams scored at least 30 points in each of the first 3 quarters. So every single quarter, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30. And then the fourth quarter was 23-23 because it was a rock fight. And again, the Warriors had not won a game all year on the road when they were down by when they were trailing in the fourth quarter. The Hawks did not shoot well at all in the fourth quarter. Now they were good on the glass, which was very helpful for some second chance opportunities. But the Warriors finally got kind of cooled off after a very hot start. There was a bizarre sequence in the middle of the fourth quarter where both teams exchanged like very strange, scattered play, missed shots and turnovers, etc. And the Warriors kind of fell asleep on a play and allowed a wide open 3 to DeAndre Hunter, who made it. But then Hunter got a technical foul right after that for basically arguing a call that just happened like possessions before that. It was very strange. But the Hawks were up by 5 coming out of that timeout in the stretch run. And rotationally, the Hawks went offense-defense for Collins and Bogey a few times. It's no longer as clean as it used to be when it comes to the Hawks starting lineup being their best lineup. It's still for the season has been their best lineup, but obviously the bench has been playing well. Okongwu in particular has been playing extremely well, and this is an Okongwu-friendly matchup against the Warriors. But the Hawks ended up going with the starters on the stretch, which I was fine with. But I do think that going with Bogey for a little bit of juice, and he was good in this game on offense, makes some sense on offense, but you also need to get stops, and that means Collins coming back in the game. So I thought they played it pretty well down the stretch, rotation-wise. But it was dicey. So I'll fast forward a little bit here to the very, very end of the game. But the Hawks started 6 of 25 from the field in the fourth quarter, including a stretch where they missed 10 of 11 shots. And that allowed the Warriors to get back into the game. But at the same time, while the Warriors got within one a few times on a layup by Steph, they missed 6 consecutive threes. And I think at least 5 of them were pretty good looks by good shooters. So the Hawks, I'm not going to say they got lucky. They were a little bit fortunate down the stretch that the Warriors miss shots that they often make. Even if they make 1 or 2 of those, it's a different game. But they missed all 6. At the same time, the Hawks missed 4 free throws in the fourth quarter. That was not great either. So it was rough. I'll say that. But the Hawks got enough stops down the stretch. I said it before, but Capella had a great rebound at one point. Collins had 2 high point, great, swirling rebounds at the rim. He made both free throws at an important juncture as well to go up by 2, up by 4. Big shots from John. And then the biggest play of the game in terms of down the stretch was the Trae Young steal plus layup at the very end. Defensively, he was aggressive there. Got some praise from Snyder down the stretch of the game after talking about just how aggressive he was making a play, and pokes it away, gets a steal and layup in transition, and that put the Hawks up by 6 with 4 seconds to go, and it's basically over from there. So again, it was not the prettiest stretch of basketball for Atlanta, but defensively, it was their best stretch, and I got a little bit lucky, yes, about the missed shooting, but the Hawks also did kind of earn their way to the win at the end. So it was not perfect by any means, but it certainly was enough to get the victory. All right, we'll get into the individual player stuff in a second, as well as the latest news at the end of the podcast. But first, a word from our sponsors on the pod. Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. When you're at your best, you can do great things. Sometimes, like as you bog down, you might feel overwhelmed, or as if you're not showing up the way that you need to or want to. If that sounds like you at all, if you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option for you. It is convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. I know people personally who've been really benefiting greatly from BetterHelp, and they're all different kinds of people who have found something different that they needed with BetterHelp. Fill out a brief questionnaire right now to get matched with a licensed therapist. If you need to switch therapists at any time, you can do so without any additional charge at BetterHelp. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can help to get you there. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon right now to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Okay, and the individual player stuff is obviously a little bit more fun to get into when they win and play generally fairly well in this game. We'll start with the bench first. I thought Saddiq Bey was probably the quietest. He had 5 points on 6 shots, 2 assists, and a steal, 3 rebounds. I thought he was fine defensively, pretty shaky, but was on the floor and giving that space. And I think it's important to recognize that Bey is not going to make every shot he takes the whole season, but he does bring value as a floor spacer because he has to be guarded. And the Warriors respect his shooting. That was very obvious throughout this game. So I thought he was okay, despite the shaky shooting numbers in this one. AJ was very aggressive, which I like to see. He took 11 shots in 21 minutes, plus free throws as well. Only 2 of 7 from 3, but 12 points, 3 rebounds, had a steal. I thought he was good. The last time he came back in the game in the rotation, he was really, really, really rough, maybe kind of, I don't know, rusty or whatever. He was really shaky, but in this one, he knew he was going to play. He came out, was aggressive and assertive, and I thought played a positive game, generally speaking. Bogey was good on offense in this one, 14 points on 11 shots, hit 4 threes off the bench, 2 blocks and a steal. We'll come back to him later on with some more stuff about his contract extension, but he was a positive in this game. And then Okongwu was awesome. I think he was probably their 3rd best player, maybe 2nd best player in this game. He was really, really good. 19 points, 7 rebounds, 2 blocks, a steal, and an assist for Onyeka. 8 of 9 from the floor, 3 of 4 from the free throw line, was very good. In fact, if anything, he should have played more. I thought the Hawks, it's kind of difficult sometimes, but I think it was Okongwu, in particular matchups against Golden State and Boston, among others. I think those probably are the 2 that jump out to me right away, where Okongwu is definitely a better matchup than Capella, but I thought Onyeka was really good in this game off the bench. Speaking of Capella, 6 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, no turnovers, plus 11 for Capella in this game. Quite an offense, but defensively was good in the second half for sure. Defensively in the first half, a little shaky, but still, I think it was more about the point of attack than anything else. I thought he was fine. Onyeka was better, I thought, but still Capella was just okay. Hunter, kind of a mixed bag game. 14 points on 12 shots, missed 2 free throws, 3 rebounds, 1 assist. I don't think he was particularly good, honestly. But it's one of those things. Like he didn't kill them, just wasn't great. Murray is still struggling. I talked about this on Monday, but he had gone through this shooting slump where he's shooting 35% for like a 6-game stretch. This didn't help in this one. He was 4 of 14 from the field and 0 of 4 from 3. A little bit of shooting stuff is not the worst thing in the world. Did have 9 assists. That's good to see for him as a ball mover. Defensively, continues to be frustrating, honestly. I think his point of attack defense has been one of the bigger culprits this year. It's been really rough. I'm not sure why it's as bad as it's been, but it really has been. It's kind of killing them at times on the perimeter, but hopefully he will snap out of that in the near future. Collins, 22 points, 5 rebounds, a steal and a block, and 4 of 7 from 3 is really good to see from Collins. 4 of 8 from 2, totally fine as well. I thought he played very well in this game. Obviously, all signs are not like perfect about his shooting, but he's been working with Kyle Korver behind the scenes as 3-point shooter. And it's one game, but him making 4 threes is not a small thing. So we'll see if that continues on Sunday. But I thought he was really good in 29 minutes. And then Trae, 25 points, 12 assists, 6 rebounds. Did have 4 turnovers. That's totally fine for him. Had the big steal, was plus 13, best number on the Hawks, and that makes a lot of sense. When Trae was on the floor, they were good. When he was off the floor, they were not good in this game. That's been the case a lot this year. Trae is tremendous, and as I said before during the ad for Nissan, actually, Trae has been awesome for like the last week plus. I think he's got 5 straight games with at least 25 points. He's really churning it right now and playing at a high level, so good to see from him. And when he's good, the Hawks are a much better team, which is obvious, but also quite true. Okay, so before we get out of here, on today's podcast, the Hawks are now 2.5 games behind the Heat for the 7 seed, 1 ahead of Toronto for the 8 seed. Some new stuff here before we get out of here, though. Some more details on Bogey. So I would encourage you to listen to all of my reaction on the emergency podcast from yesterday if you missed it. But I talked about that on the show, how it had to be declining in nature on the 4-year deal for $68 million. It had to start at least $18 million. So it had to go down on some level. But I also said the overall evaluation of the deal could change based on if the Hawks got any non-guarantees or a team option at the end of the deal. Well, they did get a team option, which definitely helps the value of the deal for the Hawks. It was reported by a couple of different people, by Marks, I think, and Ilgoga. Anyway, $18.7 million next year for Bogey in year 1, then down to $17.26 in year 2, and then about $16 million each in the last 2 seasons. So the last year is a team option, and because it's a team option, the year before that has to be at least as much as the option is for. So that's why it's flat in the last 2 years. I said on the show, again, that I would not have done the deal. I didn't hate it, but I probably wouldn't have done it. Now, I still feel that way on some level, but I will say undeniably the team option is very helpful. And if you want to know why that is, it's because, look, if something were to happen with Bogey's knee where he's not still living up to the contract, the Hawks having the ability to walk away at that point versus being locked in to that year is very helpful in terms of like downside risk. Is it going to help the upside a lot? No. But I think getting a team option there is very beneficial. It makes this deal shorter. Obviously, he'll be 33 at the end of the deal as well. So I think there is a decent chance that he's not worth $16 million at the end of the contract. So having that bit of flexibility is very helpful and definitely helps the overall evaluation, I should say, of the contract. Anyway, also, Laura Williams, the AJC, reported, and I confirmed this after the fact, that the Hawks have hired Jeff Watkinson and Stephen Clay, I think it is, to the staff. Both were on Utah staff with Snyder, so the Hawks have just kind of beefed up their room of assistant coaches and player development guys. Watkinson's more of a player development kind of guy. Clay is assistant coach, etc. So still, like, everybody's still on the coaching staff that was before, but it goes without saying that Snyder was going to make some changes going into the offseason. I would bet a hefty amount that the Hawks do not retain all of their assistants that were on the staff this year. I don't know who's going to be that leaves. They might all leave. They might stick around. We'll see. But I would certainly say that it would be unprecedented almost for Snyder to keep everyone. So we'll see if that changes. But they have now added 2 familiar faces to Snyder's staff, and also one of them, Watkinson, used to be a Hawks strength and conditioning coach. So he's been familiar with the organization in the past. Last thing on the show today before we get out of here into March Madness, a bit of an odd game on Sunday. The Hawks go to San Antonio for a 1-game road trip. That's always a little bit strange, kind of a long trip for a 1-gamer. But a 4 p.m. Eastern time tip-off on Sunday in the middle of March Madness. So definitely a game that is for the diehards. The Spurs are very bad. So I think if you are a casual Hawks fan, you will not be dialed into this one probably because it's a weird start time. It's a game against a terrible opponent in the middle of March Madness. So if you're a diehard, I'm sure you'll still watch. I know I'll be covering the game as always, but there you go on that. The Warriors at this moment, by the way, after losing today, are 18-52. Now, they've been better recently than that, I will say, to give them some credit at the end of the podcast, but still a game where the Hawks will be favored. considerably. Atlanta won by 19 points against the Spurs the first time around in Atlanta. So a game where you never want to anoint anything in the NBA. I certainly would never say the Hawks are guaranteed to win this game. They're definitely not. They will be favored. And that's a game where I will come on the show at the end of the game and say, if the Hawks lose, that would be a bad loss. I'll just say that. So that's one to keep an eye on Sunday afternoon. And that's been the next podcast that I do, barring another weird news break in between now and Sunday. But stay tuned. I'll be covering college basketball along the way as well. So if you're following me on Twitter at BT Rowland, prepare for lots of college basketball stuff the next couple of weeks out of work-related necessity. Also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks as well. Follow me on Patreon for the written content on the Hawks, patreon.com/BT Rowland. And I definitely implore you and encourage you and really thank you in advance for subscribing to the podcast and clicking on the podcast and downloading the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts as well, Spotify, YouTube. Likes, ratings, reviews, all appreciated. And please take a second if you have a Hawks fan friend in your life that has not found the podcast just yet, have them give it a chance. If they love it, that'd be great. If they don't like it, that's okay as well. But have them give us a shot. I really, really appreciate all the support we've gotten throughout the season. All right, that's enough of me on this Friday evening. Thanks for listening to the podcast, everybody, and we'll see you after the game on Sunday.